Financial year yesterday. Now, the budget looked at what the department has done in the previous financial year and their plans for the financial year coming up. We're now joined by the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr Blade Nzimande, in our Cape Town studios to tell us a little bit more. A very good morning to you, Minister, and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sissy, and to your viewers. Thanks for inviting me.
Before we get into what to look ahead for the coming financial year, or the financial year that we're currently in, let's look back at the previous financial year and dissect some of the challenges that you found 2013-2014.
Well, one of the big initiatives, over the previous financial year, of course, was the opening of the two new universities. Those were two very exciting initiatives, the first two universities in a democratic South Africa, something that was very, very important. And of course, earlier this year, the president launched the Sefako Makgato Health Sciences University as a third university after we have demerged the former Medunsa campus from the University of Limpopo. So those were some of the major achievements. Also in the previous financial year, we had started with the infrastructure build for TVET college campuses, which all of them are in the rural areas. And as I indicated yesterday, we have started with 3. We are expecting to actually receive 1 to be handed over to us shortly, the Tabazimbi campus of the TVET college there. So that was also very important in terms of our infrastructure build and in expanding post-school education and training, especially its footprint in rural areas where there is virtually no institutions that are serving students or matriculants, for that matter, who have left school but who want to acquire a further skill. So those were some of the things that we had actually done in the previous year, which we're building upon now as we are actually looking forward to what needs to be done.
What is it that your goals are for the upcoming financial year that we now find ourselves in?
Well, the one thing that we emphasize in our budget vote speech is that we are going to be paying more attention now to university transformation. Since 1994, the ANC, inspired by the Freedom Charter, which is its 60th anniversary this year, and also by other struggles, in the 70s, the 80s, especially around people's education for people's power, we've gone a long way in changing and transforming universities in our country. For instance, the majority of university students today are black and women. And also, since the establishment of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, we've spent 50 billion rands and supporting more than 1.5 million students from poor families, the majority of whom were first ever graduates in their families, whether college or university graduates. And what we want to then continue to do this year is to focus on accelerated transformation. For instance, the protests by students around statues and symbols that we saw this year, we believe that they provide an important moment in further driving the transformation progress that the ANC-led government had started in 1994. To that effect, for instance, during the second half of this year, I will be calling a university summit to actually look at progress we have made, especially since the establishment of our own department. And more importantly, to really try and reach consensus by all stakeholders. What do we mean by transformation? What are the transformation indicators that we are talking about? And what are the time frames that we actually need to be tackling? Because transformation is, of course, demographics, changing of demographics, but it also goes beyond that. It's about quality of the education we offer. It's also about relevance of the curricula that we have in our institutions. It's about eliminations, all forms of racism, sexism, and other discriminatory practices. So on the university front, that's what one will be doing. But also in addition, by the end of this month, we will have launched the forensic investigation into the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. which, as you may be aware, this year stands at a historic 9.5 billion rands. But we have actually been picking up a lot of anecdotal evidence that there is actually a lot of corruption. Many people are getting this loan which are not supposed to get it. And it's a combination of corruption by officials, some of the officials in financial aid offices of universities or colleges, as well as some of the students themselves, some who lie, for instance. Someone comes from a middle class, relatively well-off family, but goes to university and claims that no, it's that student only has a grandmother. And we have not actually been able to follow up and check properly in some of the instances as to whether this is the case. So that is why then we are embarking on a fairly comprehensive forensic investigation, because government is putting in a lot of money into this scheme.
Minister, I want to chat a little bit more about the University Summit, where a major issue is going to be on university transformation. But you just ended speaking about something very, very important, and that's the forensic investigation into NSFAS. What timeframes are you giving them to come out with some conclusive evidence and some resolutions into that investigation? As you say, there has been a lot of evidence of corruption, and now you guys have the funds sitting at 9.5 billion rand. That is a lot of money, and it would be such a waste if it's not going to the correct people.
Of course, we would like the forensic investigation to be thorough. And also let me indicate that we are not doing all our 26 universities and 50 TVET colleges, because that would just be too much. We've just selected some, but selected them in such a way that in terms of our own initial evidence, we think we will be able to get a lot of information. At the very least, despite the fact that we need thoroughness, but at the very least, because of the urgency of the situation, at least I expect to be getting a first report before the end of this year. Preferably our plans around October or so, I should be getting a first preliminary report that begins to indicate at least what's going on and what further needs to be done.
Minister, you said that towards the middle of the year, you guys would be hosting a university summit, and top of the bill there would be about university transformation. What kind of shape do you envisage university transformation taking in the coming years, or coming months, coming years?
Firstly, in relation to the summit, we would like that we prepare thoroughly for the summit. For instance, we hope that by middle of the year, June, July, we'll be having a discussion document which must be focusing on what we mean by transformation and what areas we are talking about on transformation, and then actually be saying what timeframes are we talking about and what kinds of plans at a macro level as well as at a micro-institutional level needs to be put in place so that no one is in doubt about what we want to do. But for us, of course, as I have indicated earlier, transformation firstly means demographics. For instance, the university professor rate in South Africa at the moment is still too male and too white. That actually will have to change. That's a big challenge. But we need to go beyond demographics. We need to look at curricula. We need to look at quality. And also we need to look at the pass rates. Much as I indicated yesterday in my budget vote speech that we have improved, for instance, we have reduced the failure rate at our universities, especially at first year, from 25.1% in 2005 to 19.1% at around 2012, 2013, which is a major achievement. But we do need to continue, because a high failure rate, it means that government resources are being wasted. We also have got to reduce dropout rates in our institutions. Those are very crucial dimensions of transformation, but also to make sure that we've got institutions that are inclusive. Institutions that do not discriminate on the basis of race or gender, and also institutions that do not discriminate on the basis of disability, but institutions where everybody feels welcome. That is still a huge challenge in our country and in many of our institutions.
Minister, when you speak about transformation, one of the biggest topics when it comes to sport is the transformation in sport specifically. And what happens is that when you speak about it, there seems to be, over the past couple of years, there seems to be a lot of resistance. Do you expect that when you speak about university transformation that you may come up against some resistance?
Surely, we are experiencing that even now. For instance, some of the people in our institutions want to use the issue of university autonomy, not in order to transform, but in order to block transformation. We want all those matters to come, for instance, before this discussion in the lead up to the summit, so that no one vulgarizes university autonomy in order to pursue racist practices. Some of the things, for instance, that I pointed last year in relation to a couple of universities. There are still some pockets of people who think that some of the former Afrikaans universities must remain exclusively Afrikaans medium institutions in a manner that is very insensitive to access by students whose first language may not be Afrikaans. As I said yesterday, I'm not against Afrikaans at all, or Afrikaans being used as a medium of instruction, but we must also be careful that it doesn't get used to actually make institutions inaccessible. So all these pockets of resistance, we have to confront them and deal with. And one best way of dealing with it is that we all reach some consensus and say, here is what we mean by transformation, and here is what is supposed to be done, and by which time, so that we are all able to move together. But all this will not happen, let me say this, just as my last point, unless university constituencies themselves stand up. Students must stand up, not to be violent, not to disrupt. University academics must stand up, workers in the institutions must stand up and actually partner with government in raising issues that will be able to actually accelerate transformation. That's why, for instance, I welcome this debate about the symbols in the universities, but say, let's use that as a stepping stone to actually tackling these fundamental issues of transformation.
Minister, does it not concern you, however, how some of the discussions are being brought about by having activities such as throwing of feces or maybe the defacing of statues? Would you, as a Minister of Higher Education and Training, not perhaps engage or welcome those kinds of discussions around statues and symbols and transformation, maybe being brought to the agenda in a different way?
You know, I've been engaging since I became minister, consistently with all the stakeholders, in particular students, but also vice-chancellors, workers, academics, and other formations, emphasizing this, that it's important that when we raise issues, we raise them in a constructive and disciplined way. Of course, poo throwing must be condemned, just like destruction of property and violence must be strongly condemned, and actually we will take action against people who do that. But that must not detract from the fact that there is a necessity for serious ongoing dialogue to actually be opened and be made permanent, so that we also do not engage only when there are problems or there are protests or there are boycotts, but on an ongoing basis we are able to have discussions. That is why, by the way, way back from 1994, government legislation on higher education, for instance, had made provision for what is called institutional forums, where university stakeholders in an institution outside of problems would sit down and really thrash issues, including how the institutions look, the symbols that are there, what is being taught, the demographics of teaching staff or other sections of staff of students, and so on. So it is very, very important for us, that those things are placed on the table, and then we open up such platforms as I'm pointing out.
Minister, how do you feel about some people who would argue that governments have maybe been dragging their feet about the issue, not only about symbols and statues that may offend, but transformation at universities in general?
I would not agree with the fact that government has been dragging its feet. We do have enormous challenges, and also we might not have moved at a pace we might have anticipated in 1994, but a lot of changes have actually taken place. If you look at it today, we really do not have universities that are reserved now for particular groups, much as there are certain people who still think that certain universities must be exclusive for them. But they are all South African universities now, though we actually have got challenges. The fact that the majority of students are black is something that is actually very, very important. The fact that, as I say, more than 1.5 million students from poor backgrounds have got financial assistance, that is very important. And as a matter of fact, some of our institutions have done very well in terms of driving transformation. But of course, we still have a long way to go, because turning around institutions that were formed for different racial groups and to pursue a narrow racist apartheid agenda is not something that is just going to take a short time. That is why we are saying also we are using this year as part of what the ruling party talks about, the second more radical phase of our transition. It must not just be about the economic transformation, it must also be about transformation of the higher education landscape and transformation of the entire post-school education and training, so that we truly realize what is in the Freedom Charter, that the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all.
All right. That's Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Blade Nzimande, chatting to us from Cape Town. What a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for chatting to us here on Morning Live. We've got more